Let's go! Let's go, everybody. This is Dollar Bill, and this is this edition of SPiTBALLiN. And you know how I do it on SPiTBALLiN. One topic, no BS, no scriptless nonsense. I did my homework today because I knew I was going to talk about, but you know how we do it on the Let's Go network and YouTube and Facebook and TikTok especially. So tell your friends. You might want to hear this episode, and you might want to get your popcorn ready. Because in this episode of SPiTBALLiN, there's only one topic of the day, and it deals with Mr. Brian Flores and his lawsuit, his landmark lawsuit against the NFL, and he specifically called out the Broncos, my Giants, the Dolphins, and the other 29 teams as John Does and whatnot. And then he made the rounds this morning on the circuit. It was on that Get Up show on that 4-letter network. But, 99% of the people out there buried the lead of the story. And those who know me know when I speak about things, I bring out something called the law of unintended consequences. And when you speak about the law of unintended consequences, sometimes, when you want to do right, and you want to make things better, there's any action you make, there is a consequence to it. And when the Rooney Rule was instituted in 2003, that states that any open NFL position in either the GM or the head coach becomes available, you must interview in person an outside minority before hiring that role. Okay? So, while the intention of the rule was good, the execution of the rule is shit. No other words to say it. It's complete shit. 15 candidates out of 129 hires since the Rooney Rule back 19 years ago. So it's really not producing the numbers. What's it, 8%? 15 out of 129? I don't know, 8%? That means 92 are still going to non-minority hires. And listen, every one of those had to pass the Rooney Rule, right? So they made the minorities, in a lot of cases, a token. Something that they tried to do against. When you bring that rule into play, it's 100% bull. They make the African American and minority coaches pawns, and they want them to stand up, and they just become ticking the box, a numbers game with no intention to hire. And this is what we have here with Brian Flores. He brought it to the front, though. He went after my Giants, but we'll talk about him a little bit later. Here's where they bury the lead of the story, and I can't believe these people only one who caught it was Stephen A. I think he's an a-hole, and I have no love for Keyshawn Johnson, for sure, on that show. But let me tell you something. Stephen A. got it a little bit right, and then he got it all wrong. Because Stephen A. started out saying he got it right, because the real part of this story is the only takeaway you should know. If Brian Flores can prove that Dolphins owner Stephen Ross, back in 2019, offered him $100,000 a game for any game he would lose to improve his draft position, that is the story of the day. Because if you're a general manager or a coach or a player, a coordinator, a fan, a punter, a water boy, a gambler, a fan, anything, if anything is done to prove the game is not on the level, you have no game. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, green, brown, purple, if you're from Africa, if you're from Mars, Mercury, it does not matter. You do not have a game. If Brian Flores, and I think he's a reputable guy, I heard what he said, and it's Black History Month, and people are going there too. He put his own career in jeopardy, much more so than Colin Kaepernick ever did. So let's distinguish the two right away. This is a different thing. This is a whole different animal. Because if we can kind of prove here, in the court of public opinion or otherwise, if Brian Flores can kind of prove without the shadow of a reasonable doubt that Stephen Ross did this, the ramification is this. Stephen Ross will be mandated and ordered to sell the Miami Dolphins and never have any touch with them again. That's what has to happen. That is the biggest takeaway from this whole media circus, and that's what it's kind of turning into. It's turning into a racial issue, but this is the biggest issue because it's not about black and white. It's about green. It's about money. It's about standing. It's about this, about all these billionaire owners who have their heads so high in the sky, they think they're above it all. And it's wrong. And if you have this nonsense, you don't have a level game, you don't have anything. You have no internal anything. If you don't have this, you don't have a game. It does not matter the color. So Roger Goodell's got to get on this one. And you know what? Bad PR move, I guess a good PR move, they leaned into the color aspect. This is the story. I mean, is it a shock when you put the Rooney Rule in that owners are gonna circumvent this and use black coaches as a pawn and tick the box kind of people like Leslie Frazier, who, let's be honest, he got 2 interviews with the Giants. We'll talk about the Giants situation in a second because I'm really pissed off how they went about that. And I think Stephen A. better watch his ass because they live too much in an echo chamber when people speak on his show. Too much of the same words going back and forth. I'm going to blow his ass up in a minute. But that's the story. That's the real story. The PR term buried it. If you don't have integrity, you don't have a game. Now, yes, black people, without a doubt, without a shadow of doubt, have been used as pawns. Without a doubt. But you know what? This is why you don't need the Rooney Rule. And, you incentivize them to hire, and it hasn't really worked. For the 3rd round pick, not going to work. What has worked is in cases where the Rooney Rule does not apply. I did a little research today. I know this isn't how we normally do spitballing, but when you have a sensitive matter like this, I got to do the research. In the NFL, from 2020 to 2021, the amount of coordinators that are held by minority candidates has gone up from 17 to 25. You think of people in the top 8 in the Super Bowl. There's a defensive coordinator in the Super Bowl next week. They were in the final 4. There were multiple coordinators of color and of minority standing. Everyone wants to make this a black issue. It should be a minority issue. We talk about there's only one head coach in the NFL that's black. That's Mike Tomlin. Never had a losing season. Terrific. Let's talk about Robert Saleh in New York. He's a Muslim. He's a minority. But we don't do that. We don't talk about that because that changes the narrative. So that's the problem there in a nutshell. So that Stephen Ross thing is top and foremost. Did racism happen? Absolutely. Have been black people and minorities shortchanged for jobs? Absolutely. Did people tick the box? Absolutely. He just brought it to everyone's attention. And you know what? Good for Brian Flores to bring it to the attention. But here's where I kind of disagree. This is where the Rooney Rule hurts. And you allege that you didn't get a fair shake from the Giants. Now, you might not have gotten a fair shake from the Broncos, and they're going to get smacked for this. But here's the thing. 6 people got interviewed to be the head coach of the New York Giants. 6. 3 of them were African-American descent. They just hired a general manager from Buffalo. His first interview was the offensive coordinator who he probably hired and definitely worked with when he was within Buffalo. So that was the preferred candidate. He interviewed the in-house defensive coordinator who happened to be black. Since he knew him, he interviewed Leslie Frazier not once but twice. Once in Zoom, once in person. Dan Quinn was mentioned, a couple other names were mentioned, and Flores, had a Zoom call on January 18th, and then now the infamous text from Bill Belichick, he texted the wrong Brian. Both were on his staff, both were immensely qualified, This is where it goes. You can't say, you feel like a pawn when you weren't even the first black person they got in touch with. So get off your horse, Brian Flores, in this instance. By saying you got shortchanged, that takes away from Leslie Frazier and the guy who they ultimately hired. The guy got his job from Buffalo and knew what his Buffalo guys, right? So he interviewed both coordinators to see if they were going to be head coach material for his team. He went with what he knew. You're going to hold him to the fire with that? I call bullshit on you for that one, Mr. Flores, Bullshit. Complete bullshit. The guy knew in his job, he went with the familiar guy. And you're going to fault him for that? Like you didn't have a chance? The whole thing with Belichick, yes, someone probably spoke out of turn early. But you know what? The decision was not final by then. If you read the text, Bill said he never got the job. It appeared that he was the leading candidate. You still had a chance to turn heads. And you had a real chance for that job. If you hear John Mara speak, and he didn't speak, I think he speaks the truth. I think he's kind of a moron at times. He's certainly not his dad. But, you had a real chance for the job. You declined to not go take the interview. And you know what? Whether you feel like you're a trained whatever, jumping through hoops, you got to do it. Because there's always that slim chance that if someone has their mind 99% made up, you have the power to change people's mind. And you didn't take the onus to take that interview in person because you thought it was beneath you. That's on you, bud. So if you want to call out racism, I get it. If you want to call out certain things, they showed up hungover in the Broncos, I get it. I hope you can prove the stuff against Stephen Ross, because to be honest, when all of us across the board in media or listening, when you got fired, and with a losing record, I might add, it doesn't matter. Everyone calls you a winning coach. You have a losing record, but it is what it is. I'm just calling it out. You took a team that was 1-7, and you turned it around. And in 2019, the first 5 games were awful, and people were questioning if they hired the right guy, and clearly they did. And obviously there was friction because the 2 people above you wanted Tua and you wanted Justin Herbert. And guess what? You were damn right. And you took the brunt of this unjust firing. And that is true. And I hope you get your day in court. And I hope you get your restitution from the NFL. But I think you deserve it. Here's the problem. I think you barked up the wrong tree with the Giants. And the old saying, you don't want to be the boy that cried wolf. You just want to present facts. You might have been mistaken. I think the Giants handled it pretty poorly. I don't think, it was racism in this case. The Broncos, yeah. And certainly Stephen Ross had a bone to pick with you. Take your energy and devote it to that part of the case because you have a real case there. And you have a chance to be a real trailblazer. And listen, the Houston Texans, for as a dysfunctional group of people that are there, I'm going to tell you right here on this show for everybody to hear. The Houston Texans would be a fool not to hire you, Brian Flores. You would be the best and easiest hire that franchise would ever have now and for the next 100 years. You're a great coach. There is dysfunction. You get the most out of your players. You deserve a job. You can work with Deshaun Watson. You have a good chance there. Houston is built for Brian Flores, and I hope you get that job. And I hope you get your restitution, but stop barking at the Giants. The Giants didn't do anything wrong. Blame the rule, not the messenger. And they still did a pretty good job. You can't cry wolf, Brian, with the Giants. And I know it comes off like I'm coming like a Giant fan. You can't cry wolf, Brian, when they interviewed 2 other black men as well. You didn't get the job. He took the guy, the new GM, took the guy he knew because that was his guy. You didn't get not hired because you weren't good enough or you weren't white. He just took his guy. Take your argument elsewhere. You have very compelling case. use it against Stephen Ross. Because if this is a draw your line in the sand moment, this moment, if you prove to be correct, and I hope you are, and my gut says I think you are, but if you can prove it, you will make history and get that owner out of here. And you know for damn well that a black ownership group is going to be led by someone like Jay-Z or somebody, and you're going to pool their money together, and you're going to help get black ownership foot in the door in the NFL, and I don't think it's a bad thing. However, let's not call it a slam dunk, because while I'm going after people, there seems to be a black owner in the NBA who owns 97% of his team. But if you look at a picture at his general manager and at his coach, if you're in the African-American community, I think you'd be disappointed. That's it for this edition of SPiTBALLiN. Please listen to us on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and, of course, TikTok. Try and make some common sense of this all. It's a landmark day no matter how this shakes out. You know, someone's going to fall here, and I hope Brian Flores gets a job, and I hope he gets it real soon. And I hope he gets it with the Texans, because I really think he deserves it. But this is Dollar Bill reminding you to make some common sense out of your sports and your life. And as an antidote, never forget the law of unintended consequences. Bye.